What up, Wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy from the place. I feel like you haven't seen him in a long time. Anyway, did you think just because it was the weekend, we were going to stop doing previews? That's not how it works, man. Preview season truly is forever. It's never ended, ever in the past. It has always been an unbroken chain of new cards. I'm still in 1408. Hi, everyone. Let's look at some Murders at Karlov Manor previews. Now, we didn't get too many today. I think we only got like 7. But good news is only one of those is an uncommon. The rest are all rares and mythics, and the majority of those look to be actual bangers. Certified? I'm not sure yet, but they do look pretty good. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, the first thing I want to look at today is that random uncommon that we happen to get. It's Candlestick, just a single blue mana for an artifact, which is a clue equipment. It's one of these. That means that you can pay 2 and sack it to draw a card. You can also equip it for 2, and when you do, the equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature attacks. Surveil 2. So I just kind of like that this cycle is 1 mana clues. There's something kind of inherently cool about that. Extra value is always nice, and Surveil 2 isn't bad, but I really don't have anything more to say about this, so we can just jump right over that and go to Cryptex, our first rare of the day. A 2 mana rock, sort of. This is just 2 for an artifact. You can tap it and collect evidence 3. And add 1 mana of any color. Then you put an unlock counter on Cryptex, and you sacrifice Cryptex to Surveil 3, then draw 3 cards. Activate only if Cryptex has 5 or more unlock counters on it. I have my doubts about this thing, as you can probably tell by my tone of voice and the fact that it's the second card we're looking at of the day, but I still think it's kind of neat if nothing else, but I say that about a lot of cards. As far as its actual playability, I think it might be there, and I'm just misjudging it, but all I really see is a total of collect evidence 15 to draw the cards, and I don't love doing that, right? But in the meantime, collect evidence 3 for each tap is not actually as hard as it initially sounds, just removing a 3-drop from your yard or something. You can even remove like a 4 or 5-drop, and that's still fine. Now, one thing about this card that I think is actually kind of great and might make it a little more playable than it first appears once we get out into the real world with it is that as long as you're casting instants and sorceries, or really any kind of card that's going to go more or less directly into your graveyard after you cast it, then suddenly this is like giving you a rebate on those spells a little bit. For example, I cast a Sunfall, right? First of all, this can tap to ramp me into my Sunfall on turn 4, which I want if I'm playing Sunfall. But just in case I don't have anything to collect evidence with when I go to cast my Sunfall, well, now I have a Sunfall in my graveyard. That means that on subsequent turns, it's more or less guaranteed ramp with this card. And you know, I'm playing Sunfall. Maybe I resolve 1 or 2 of those over the course of the game, plus a make disappear and a removal spell, and suddenly I can draw 3 cards, and it wasn't even that hard. How many times have you played against Control in the last year or so where they do exactly that? They resolve like 2 farewells, a make disappear, and 2 removal spells, and suddenly if they had this in play, not only could they help ramp into all that stuff, but they could also draw cards off of this, and that would be kind of a nightmare, honestly. Like, once this is ready to draw cards, it's actually ridiculous, because once you're at that point in the game, you probably really need those 3 cards. And so, I don't know, man. I initially didn't like this very much, and I do think that obviously it takes a really long time to actually draw the cards off of it, and you have to enable the actual ramp. But I guess my points here are that I don't think enabling the ramp is actually that hard in the right kind of deck. And honestly, I don't think drawing the cards is that hard in the right kind of deck either. So I'm starting to come around on this card, but I still have better things to talk about today. Or at least what I think are better things. Stuff like Urgent Necropsy right here. 4 mana, 2, a green and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, collect evidence X, where X is the total mana value of the permanents this spell targets. Destroy up to 1 target artifact, up to 1 target creature, up to 1 target enchantment, and up to 1 target planeswalker. Let's not Casualties of War. I would like for it to be. You know, you pick your battles. There's some really good stuff about this card, even though you have to work hard to enable it just a little bit. You know, I was just talking a second ago about how all you have to do to enable that 2 mana rock is just like cast spells. That's all you really have to do in order to make that thing work, right? So I kind of feel the same way about this. Let's say you're playing some sort of Golgari mid-range or control deck or something, and you plan to maybe remove a creature with a 2 mana removal spell on turn 2. And then on turn 3, you're going to either cast a spell, you're going to cast like Graveyard Trespasser or some other 3-drop like Glissa or whatever. And like maybe that gets removed, right? Well, suddenly that means you can take out a 2-drop and a 3-drop on turn 4 on curve with this card at instant speed. And all you really did was like play Magic. Again, I just don't think that like instant speed, blow up creature, blow up enchantment is ever going to be like bad, especially considering it's, again, not like that hard to enable, you know, sometimes you'll be able to say, just collect evidence, one card out of your graveyard, like a 4 or a 5 drop that's sitting in there. And then you can blow up like a 3 drop creature and a 2 drop enchantment or vice versa or whatever. So again, just at instant speed, being able to like, 2 for 1 your opponent in that way is probably pretty good, and you don't even have to set it up, as much as it maybe looks like you have to set it up. For instance, a last little example, let's say Sunfall one more time. I'm just going to keep bringing that card up, probably more in this video than just this entry and the last one, but still, let's say that I'm playing Abzan Control or something because I'm crazy, and then you resolve a Sunfall on turn 4, or let's say you can ramp into it, you're playing green, it's not unheard of, right? So let's say you play your Sunfall on 4. Okay, now you got this in your hand and a Sunfall in your yard. So instant speed, it can take out almost any Planeswalker they play pretty easily, but it can do a lot of other stuff too, you know? At that point, you just get rid of the Sunfall in your yard and take out, again, 3 drop creature, 2 drop enchantment, or whatever, you know? So you use that Sunfall, sweep the board away, and then you can use this to either pick up permanent types the Sunfall didn't take care of, you know, or when they start reestablishing board presence, you can use this to take out creatures and just get rid of that Sunfall from your yard to help cover it. So I do like this, man. The more I think about collect evidence stuff, the more I like it. Now, we've seen a lot of weird cards in this set, and I really like that. I enjoy weird cards. Let's look at another one now, but this one I think is actually really good. It's Lost in the Maze. X and 2 blue for an enchantment with flash. That's important. When it ETBs, tap X target creatures, but a stun counter on each of those creatures you don't control. Here's a line of text. Tapped creatures you control have hexproof. My goodness, I love the modality on this. This is like 8 different spells. I mean, probably not quite that many, but first of all, it's scalable. It can target your guys and your opponent's guys. You can just pay like 3 mana and save one of your own dudes effectively. Just flash this in and your tap dudes have hexproof. Tap down one of your own guys. You also can just flash this in for 2 mana. You can just flash it in for 2 mana. Suddenly for the rest of the game, all your tap dudes have hexproof. It seems pretty fun. Or you can use it as a tempo piece or like a kind of a blue, I was going to say sweeper. Not quite, but you know, if you pump like 4 mana into this, then suddenly when your opponent announces their intention to move to their attack step, you can use that as a chance to tap down 2 other guys, put stun counters on them, whatever. That also seems sick. So there's just kind of a lot of cool stuff about this card. I don't even know for sure if it's playable, to be honest, but I kind of, again, I want to go back to this mode on it. I think just 2 mana instant speed, your tap dudes have hexproof is like kind of a gross mode by itself. And the fact that they just slapped an X cost onto it and like, oh, by the way, you can do other stuff with it. It's defensive, it's offensive, whatever you want to do, it's fine. So I just really actually like this spell kind of a bit. And I wish that I had a ton more to say about it because I think there's some intricacies here, but I've kind of gone over the fact that it's a billion spells already. And the cool thing is all those spells sound like a good spell to cast. Let's move on to a dinosaur that doesn't have the dinosaur type, but I'm pretty sure this was at one point a dinosaur. It's Hunted Bone Brute. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 6/2 skeleton beast with Minos. And when it ETBs, target opponent creates 2 1/1 white dog creature tokens. When it dies, not the dogs, but when Hunted Bone Brute dies, each opponent loses 3 life. You can also disguise this for 1 and a black. Another day, another this is now the best disguise guy in standard card. You know, like every day they show us like one card that we're like, okay, this could maybe, okay, is disguise okay in standard? Are we doing it? I don't think so. And with this guy, I think we finally reached like the pinnacle of disguise dudes in standard, but I actually kind of hope I'm wrong on that. That said, the dude is good, you know, he's like a Reggie, like a rotting Regisaur, kind of. But either way, he's like another 3-drop for fight rigging decks, you know, like now they've got a bunch of those. They got this guy Shakedown Heavy, Pugnacious Hammer Skull, like I think the fight rigging deck is like full capacity. It's got all the 3s that it needs, you know, so it's actually kind of gross. But aside from just the fight rigging deck, this is obviously just a 3 mana 6 power guy with Menace in this case. So it's pretty great. You have to figure out what you're doing with them dogs at some point, but it's not that big of a deal. There are definitely times I wish we had Meat Hook Massacre still in this format. I think this would be pretty sweet in those decks. Can we have Meat Hook back? Do you guys want Meat Hook back? I want to know in the comment section how you feel about that. I feel like sometimes I want Meat Hook back. But anyway, that's it's neither here nor there. I just think this is a sweet little dude that can die to like shock and play with fire, which is kind of booty. It's a little bit booty, especially if your opponent did get the dogs. I guess disguising this on 3 and then flipping it up on turn 4 or something not only means you have extra mana left over on turn 4, but also means that your opponent doesn't get the dogs, which is kind of nice. I still think he's good. If he dies in combat, it often means that he got 2 things off your opponent's side of the table and he bolted them for just a 3 mana investment, which is okay. And finally, just one last quick little thing here. If he is in your fight rigging deck, I should probably point out that when you resolve this on 3, play your fight rigging on 4, and suddenly he gets +1/+1 counter, and them 2 dogs can't just take him out by themselves anymore. And that's probably pretty relevant for that deck. But we've only got a couple of more cards to look over today, and they are both very strong. Basically, no notes on either one of these cards. They both look like bangers to me. We got Ezam, Agency Chief up first, and then a Black Sweeper in the on-deck circles, so look forward to that. But I gotta read you Ezram first. He looks obnoxiously powerful. This is 5 mana, 1, 2 white, and 2 blue for a 5/5 legendary Archon Detective with flying. When he ETBs, investigate twice. You can also pay 1 and sack any old artifact to have Ezram gain your choice of Vigilance, Lifelink, or Hexproof until end of turn. Now, honestly, I was already impressed by a 5 mana 5/5 flyer that just gives you 2 investigates when he comes into play. Like, that's already okay, but then once you get to that last word there, once you get to Hexproof, suddenly the card just really snaps off. Even if your opponent does like manage to get rid of it with a removal spell or something, it's still investigated twice. Like, it still replaced itself twice. That's good. And it put 2 artifacts into play, blah, blah, blah. Like that could matter. But mostly, this is a 5 mana 5/5 flyer that, like, even if it's dealt with, kind of still drew you 2 cards. And that just by itself is absurd in some ways as like a control finisher, potentially, right? I still think, though, there might be better control finishers that still don't see that much play, you know? Like, Hullbreaker Horror is in the format right now, and it's just ridiculous. It's like a dream come true control finisher. And still, control isn't that dominant in the format, and you don't see that many Hullbreaker Horrors. Even when you do see control, you just don't see that many. So I'm not sure this thing actually goes in any deck. It actually looks like the kind of thing that a control mage would have loved to finish the game with in like 2015. But nowadays, I'm not really too sure about it. That said, just in a vacuum, on the surface, it's obviously a very powerful card, man. A 5/5 flyer can easily end the game. The fact that it investigates twice means that it's, that's just about the best insurance you could hope for once the card is resolved. And of course, you can always just keep them from getting rid of it in the first place by giving it a hexproof. Lifelink is really important too. I haven't brought that up. Vigilance and Lifelink are both great. If you do resolve this against aggro decks or whatever, you have the chance to swing in Lifelink or swing in Vigilance and keep it up to block. That's important. But obviously, a hexproof is like the main attraction on this one as far as control finishers go. And I should point this out too before I get off this card, because I just think he's really good. He doesn't just have to sack clues. It's any old artifact, which I've already made fairly clear in the reading of the card. But I should also say that in like Azorius control decks that want to play this dude, there are artifacts. You could play the Iron Crag. A lot of those decks play the Celestus. You could definitely emergency sacrifice either one of them to make sure this dude stays on the table. But there's also like the Incubator token from a Sunfall that you resolved earlier in the game. That's just sitting there or whatever. And that could definitely give this dude hexproof, keep him alive. So I don't know, man. I just think that even those blue-white artifact decks that don't play a ton of artifacts still just happen to have artifacts they can sack to this. A Clay-Fired Bricks they played earlier in the game. I'm still coming up with examples. There's actually a fair number of arties in these like random control decks. He can sacrifice any one of them and just get in. I don't know. I want to talk about this dude all day, but I think he's just kind of obviously a powerful card. We'll just have to see if Standard's in the right place where this dude is actually playable. And honestly, if a card like this isn't going too far, then I think we've already long since gone too far. So let's move on to our final card of the day. I promised you a Black Sweeper, and it's not just like a crappy one like we've been getting for the last like few sets in a row here. It's actually a decent Black Sweeper. Let's take a look at Deadly Cover-Up. Now, this is 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast it, you may collect Evidence 6. Destroy all creatures. If evidence was collected, exile a card from your opponent's graveyard. Then search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them. That player shuffles and draws a card for each card exiled from their hand this way. So it's one of these. It does that thing that black does sometimes where it exiles stuff, but that's not the important part, although it is pretty sweet. We'll get to it in a second. The important part is that this is never any worse than 5 mana, destroy all creatures. Now, obviously, that's not Sunfall, but it is a black, like, unconditional sweeper, and we just really don't have any of those that don't make you jump through ridiculous hoops, like having a bunch of weird land types or blah, blah, blah. Like, there are black sweepers in Standard, but the best black sweeper in standard makes you play white for it to be playable. Path of Peril, so I just feel like we haven't had a good black sweeper in a while. And this is not Damnation, but it's literally 1 mana away from Damnation and does more stuff. It doesn't just do good stuff. I'm honestly underselling it. It does fantastic, potentially demoralizing stuff if you can actually collect Evidence 6, which, as I've said, might not actually be that hard, all things considered. But once you do that, you can basically say, okay, I'll destroy all your guys. You know that guy that you want to draw or maybe play from your hand because you have another one anyway, like a jerk? You know that guy that you're just going to try to repopulate your board state with next turn? No, you can't do that. Not that guy. And the fun thing is, you don't even have to get rid of a creature. When I first read this card, I could swear that it had a creature clause on the thing you could exile, but no, you just exile any card, including basic lands. Usually these will have like a non-basic land clause on them, but no, this one, knock yourself out. If you're playing against a monocolored deck and you resolved this on turn 4 and you went first, and suddenly you just get rid of all of their planes or whatever. And that's probably hilarious. I'm amazed that you can get rid of basics with this, but it's probably not going to be great to actually do that 9 times out of 10. What you actually want to do is get rid of something that you never want to see ever again because it beats you. And honestly, that might not be too hard to pull off. But again, even if you can't collect Evidence 6 when you initially cast this card, first of all, you ought to be able to do it the second time you cast this card in a game. But if it's the first time you can't collect Evidence 6, who cares? Who cares? Why do you cast a sweeper on turn 5? To do funky stuff? No, you just want the guys off the table. And this does that basically every single time. Now, that was the last card of the day 2 minutes ago. But I've just reloaded Mythic Spoiler, and there are 3 new cards that I've never ever seen before and have yet to read. So bonus content today. Let's look over these 3, it looks like lower rarity cards together to kind of finish off the video. And then we'll meet back here tomorrow for more spoilers. But for now, let's see what these cards even are, because I have no idea right now. All right, so let's start, I guess, with Karlov Watchdog here. He's 4 mana, 3 and a white for a 3/2 dog with vigilance. Not the best stats in the world. Permanents your opponent's control can't be turned face up during your turn. Okay. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. So not other creatures either. He gets the +1/+1, which will actually really matter in limited because that 1 point of toughness is going to help to make sure he doesn't get eaten up by disguised creatures. And it's cool that they can't like blow you out in combat at all during your turn by flipping up disguised dudes. I like the flavor of that. He's a watchdog. They can't flip guys up. That's cute. But either way, he's kind of neat in limited where he's, in your aggressive decks at least, he's usually a 4 mana 4/3 vigilance. That kind of gives you a little like blowout insurance on your turn. You can swing with a little bit more, personal freedom. And, you can take a deep breath and just swing and not worry about your opponent having open mana or anything. And I like that. So he's actually good, and he looks kind of bread and buttery, specifically in like white-based aggressive decks. But again, only really in limited, to be honest. So I'll move on to Glint Weaver. He's a big spider. I like those. 7 mana for a 3/3. What do you do, man? 5 and 2 green for a 3/3 spider with reach. When he enters the battlefield, distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures, and then you gain life equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control. Okay, so he's actually a 7 mana 6/6 reach that gains you 6 life. That makes a little bit more sense. That's cute. We saw a really aggressive card, and this is a really kind of defensive, like rampy, cast in the late game to catch yourself back up kind of thing. I do like that he's not necessarily a 7 mana 6/6, right? But he's going to put that many stats into play, and you could really have a lot of choice here over how you distribute the counters, which is always nice too. But obviously 7 mana is 7 freaking mana, so we have that to consider too. I don't love this guy. Let's finish off with Sanctuary Wall here. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 0/4 artifact creature, which is a wall, and of course it has Defender. You can pay 2 and a white, so 3 total mana, and tap it to tap target creature. You may put a stun counter on it. If you do, put a stun counter on Sanctuary Wall. It's pretty bad. I wish this wasn't the last card of the day. It feels a little anticlimactic, but it's a 2 mana 0/4 wall. Those have literally never been playable. Well, that's not true, Dev. That is not true at all. Like Wall of Blossoms was playable. Wall of Roots was playable, although it's a 2 mana 0/5, but still, you get my point. It's not like they're never playable. What is it like? Wall of Essence was sort of playable. Angelic Wall. What is it called? It's like the 2 mana white wall that's basically a Wall of Blossoms. Okay, so these can... These have been playable actually in the past. I shouldn't have said that, but this one isn't. This one's not. It's not playable. Like whatsoever. Why does it get a stun counter? Does it have to get a stun counter? I guess if it didn't get a stun counter, you could slowly lock down your opponent's entire team, but that'll take many turns and many mana, so I think it would still be a little fine, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe in your like defensive white limited decks, it's kind of okay, you know, like block this guy. Well, yeah, that it wouldn't really work the way you wanted it to, right? Because you want to block and then tap a guy down, but the guy you want to tap down is already attacking. I guess if they've already cast a creature, block with it, tap the guy down you just cast so he can't attack next turn. I don't know. I want this to work and I just can't. I can't make it work. But I don't know. I guess at instant speed, if your opponent goes to remove this for whatever reason, I guess they're wasting a removal spell on it. If you have the mana open, you can tap it down, put a stun counter on a thing your opponent controls, and then you don't care that it gets a stun counter. It's on its way to the graveyard. So I don't know. I'm talking way too long about this card. I don't know. It's not good. No one will ever think about it again after this. You know, maybe I should just use YouTube magic to like edit me talking about these 3 cards in before we get to the last couple of cards of the day, but I probably won't do that. I probably won't do that because otherwise, why am I standing here talking to you face to face about like Sanctuary Wall? That doesn't make any sense. I didn't talk about like the 2 mana rare rock face to face. So why Sanctuary Wall all of a sudden? It would look weird, but either way, you know that there's going to be more spoilers tomorrow. Meet me back here if you would. There's going to be like 20 plus of them tomorrow. They're really going to come down the pipe, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to be just as wacky as all the cards from this past week. So make sure again that you're subscribed to the channel so that you can meet me back here, so you know where to go. You can't just use GPS. Don't try to find my house, please. But either way, there's going to be more tomorrow. So hope you enjoyed all the stuff from today. We did get to see some pretty relevant stuff from today. Let me know what your favorite stuff was, and if there's anything I missed, interactions, decks especially, whatever, let me know down there in the comments section. But for now, that is, of course, Allski Kowalski. Again, subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 132,000. I think we only need like 700 people right now. So if you don't think you can make a difference by subbing, you're wrong. Go ahead and hit that button. It would mean a lot to me. And you can also check out the Patreon. Of course, the link's in the description. I'm a YouTuber. My Patreon link is in the description. But $1 a month is all I really ask from you, and it helps out tremendously. You know, I really couldn't still be doing this if it weren't for the Patreon people. So any little bit you can give helps an amazing amount, and I'm thankful for all of you. So appreciate your patrons as usual. But for now, I guess that's Itski Lewitsky. I guess I get to use all my catchphrases for this one. I feel like I haven't used my catchphrases at the end of a video in a while, but anyway, I'm done over this one, though, so I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.